Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown show, the show in which we look at the players that Arsenal are being linked to this summer, autumn, it could be by the time we actually get round to the transfer window, and we break them down in an analytical way with the help of a fantastic expert. And today is no different as we look at Porto's defensive midfielder Danilo Pereira, who has been touted as a possible alternative to Thomas Partey, who of course has been linked to Arsenal for an incredibly long time. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some help from an expert on Danilo Pereira. We're going to look into some of his stats and do a little bit of comparison as well between him and Thomas Partey too, in addition to looking at some of the graphics, because I know that last time we did the show, which was on Gilson Fernandes, another Portuguese player, we got some really genuinely fantastic feedback from the show. So I'm genuinely so pleased that we did, because we're trying to do this in a different way using StreamYard to record these shows to make the editing process much simpler by removing it and ultimately focusing mainly on looking at sort of more key things to do with the players, but the more time that's been made available to me. It does mean that the pressure's on and doing these in just one take, but it's a challenge that I'm willing to go for, basically, and try and smash for you guys and ultimately give you the best product possible. So let's crack on with things. But before we do, please make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn those notifications on so you never miss a show. But I'm going to throw over to our expert, who is going to be Jose Miguel, who I was very, very keen to point out that you pronounce it Jose, like Jose Mourinho. The Portuguese term is a hard J, whereas the Spanish, which is what I'm more comfortable with, usually is a softer J. But thank you to those in the comments that were helping me with the pronunciation, and I did double check with Jose beforehand. So it is Jose Miguel. He's obviously a Portuguese football expert. He's a sporting fan, but he knows a hell of a lot about what goes on in Liga NOS. So let's get into things and talk to Jose about Danilo Pereira.
Hey there again, guys. I'm here to talk to you about Danilo this time. He's a Porto defensive midfielder. He's 28 years old, and he's been strongly linked to a move to Arsenal in the last few days. It is said that Arsenal is looking to sign Thomas Partey from Atletico, but that Danilo is a valid alternative to that signing in case it doesn't happen. And I believe it's a good alternative. He was just Portuguese champions, with Porto. He's the captain of the team. He's the captain of Porto, which is, a good rank for a player in Portugal. And he's that kind of defensive midfielder who is very strong physically. He's very good at tackling, at marking. He plays very good with his head. And he's in the defensive part, he's almost perfect. He adds lots of security and safety to the team's defense. However, he lacks some technical ability, I believe. But I think Arsenal does not have a player like Danilo in its squad. Danilo is not like Guendouzi, for example. He's much less technical and much more physical. He's quite quick as well, but most of all he's very aggressive, very intense in his playing, and that's his best feature, I believe. He's also intelligent in his playing. He knows where to be. He knows which spaces are there for the taking, and I believe he would add some value to Arsenal. In the last few games, since the Portuguese league restarted in June, Danilo has lost some space in the Porto squad. I don't know if it was from physical problems or for wanting to leave the club, but he stopped being so regularly in the starting 11. He was replaced by another Porto youngster. He's not so young now, but was raised in Porto, who is Sergio Oliveira, who's been playing very, very well. And so Danilo has come off the bench quite a lot of times, and I think he's lost some space due to his style of playing as well. As I referred, he's not a technical player. He's much more aggressive player, physical player, and he's there to play much more fixed a bit like Matic in Manchester United, but with much less technical ability. But I believe he would add lots of value to Arsenal because Arsenal does not have a player with these features, and I believe every team needs a player with these features, even though he doesn't play all the time in all games. It's always valuable to have a strong player, physical player that you know you can count on, and that is reliable in defensively speaking. In the national team, Danilo has not played that much as well. There's always been this rivalry for like 5 years, 6 years now between Danilo and William Carvalho, who is another Portuguese defensive midfielder who is said to be moving to Leicester City. And William has been given more opportunities than Danilo, nationally speaking. And also now there's Ruben Neves, who has been playing in that position, and so Danilo has not had many chances in the national team, in the Portuguese national team.
So there you go. Thank you to Jose there for giving us all the information on Danilo Pereira. Some really, really top quality stuff there. There's some points that I want to pick out on specifically, mainly actually the physical side of things to begin with, because I don't want to get too sidetracked and distracted talking about Danilo Pereira as a player that doesn't have technical ability, and we will talk about that. But I actually want to mainly talk about the physical side of things, because it's something that Arsenal lack. And to do that, I want to show you with some help of some graphics that this certainly is part of his game. In his away game, Porto are under the cosh here, and I have at the moment, as you can see, got a 3-2 lead. And in the box, this physicality that Danilo has is strong. It adds value to that side. Now, Arsenal, we know, can sometimes struggle being a bit of a physical side. You look at the midfielders that we've got, Xhaka, Pereira, Ceballos, Xhaka obviously being the most physical of all of those. There is a sense that there isn't that bulky, tall, industrious midfielder that we don't really have. And I think Danilo definitely would add that to the team, the same as Thomas Partey would add that to the team, but in a slightly more advanced position than Danilo. As we talked about, Danilo is very much a defensive midfielder, whereas Partey is more of a slightly more advanced in the central part of the midfield area. Look at another example. Clearly, he is second best at the moment. The opposition player, Vitoria, who of course Arsenal played in the Europa League this season, is in contention with the ball. Easily could outrun Danilo, but he uses his strength, uses his power, and he gets the ball off him. And not only does he tackle it, he keeps the ball in play and plays the ball out to a teammate as well. So it's really key that we look at some of the key parts of his game that actually are beneficial and do work in Arsenal's favour. And I think physicality is definitely one of those. But what we like to do is we like to look at the statistics, as you know, as well as the heat map, which you can see on your screen now. And he is more of a defensive midfielder. He will venture into the opposition half sometimes, but you can see the most intense part of that heat map, the red areas in the central part on the left-hand side. He plays more as the left-hand side, which does conflict a bit with Granit Xhaka, of course. But he's fluid. He's not skewed one way or the other. Playing as sort of a lone defensive midfielder more often than not, he does tend to sort of skew to the left over the right-hand side. But that is certainly something that Arsenal could use. If we then go into his attacking stats, which is always a bit comical when we look at more defensive players, but it's still important. Goals, 2 assists, 1, shots, not too many in each game. And if they are, they're usually what it seems to be from corners when he gets up using his massive height and build to win those headers. That's certainly where the 2 goals have come from, as you can see there. But it's actually the dribbles that I'm really interested in. The dribbles is an interesting one because I feel like this is where the technical side of things comes into it. I want a player that can move the ball out, a player that can beat the press, someone that can do what Graham Hunter told us that Partey could do. And 1.14 dribbles in each game isn't too many, is it? Progressive runs, 0.62, isn't too many either. Offensive duels is not bad, 3.54, but only wins just over 50% of those. Now, if we have a look at Thomas Partey's statistics, which you should be able to see on the screen now, I'll make that slightly larger for you. You can see there that Thomas Partey's dribbles is higher, 2.32 compared to the 1.41 before, and he's winning, or 63.3% of those are successful, and he makes slightly more progressive runs than what Danilo does. And I get that part of this is down to Partey being naturally a more advanced player than a defensive midfielder, even though Partey this season has played most of the games at defensive midfield because, of course, they lost Rodri to Manchester City and didn't replace him effectively. But it is still important to talk about how I do feel that we need a defensive-minded midfielder rather than an out-and-out defensive midfielder, but still one that's going to be sort of a 6 to an 8, sort of in between those two roles, that can carry the ball. And I think that it's important that we get that in a player. And I'm not quite sure if you're going to get that from Danilo Pereira. But let's carry on and look at his passing stats, because passing is exceptionally key. 46 passes in each game, 88.6% pass accuracy is good. I like that a lot. That's nice. Long passes. This is actually something that I wanted to highlight in a bit of detail, because whilst definitely passing, like dribbling the ball out and carrying the ball is a way to beat the press, also long passes to wide areas are key. And you can see that playing for the national side that he does this really well, finding those wide areas. Bernardo Silva being the example in this game against the Ukraine, in which obviously they lost, unfortunately, as you can see. But the ball out towards Bernardo Silva is a really good one to try and beat those pressing options. You've also got one where he can drop back into the back line, like he's done here in this game against Chavez. And the ball then that goes over the top is a really good one for the right winger to run onto, not just straight into feet, making him under pressure immediately, but one that plays over the top of the defence. And you know that Arsenal, with David Luiz in the lineup, have found that ball to wide areas over the top quite effective in some areas. So someone that's got that in their locker, I think, is particularly important. But let's have a look in comparison to Thomas Partey's passing statistics. 86.7%. So in terms of accuracy of passing, Danilo gets that. Long passing accuracy, 65% to 5.53. And we talked about Danilo's being 61.8. So it's slightly better, and he makes slightly more of them, does Partey. So for me in this area, I'm utterly fine with what Partey provides you in compared to Danilo, and I don't think it's too much in the Portuguese man's favour to oust Thomas Partey in that sense. Passing to the final third, though, is quite impressive. 75% accuracy of a 7.57 of those being made. I think that's very, very good. But he doesn't find too often passes into the penalty area, where actually, if you look at Thomas Partey's statistics for this, you can see that Thomas Partey's passes into the area is 1.91 with nearly 50% accuracy. And actually, he's making 10 passes into the final third. So progressively, Thomas Partey is definitely coming out on top in this one. Forward to backward pass ratio is positive, but also is Thomas Partey's in a lot more sense of the word. Over 3 times there, the amount of forward passes to backward passes. That's definitely something you have to take into account. So if we then move on to the defensive statistics, which obviously are really key when talking about a player that plays deep in the midfield. 4.5 defensive duels per game, winning 65% of those is very strong as well. I like that. If we make a quick comparison to Thomas Partey, defensive duels 7.33 with a 63.2% success rate. So slightly less in terms of the amount that he's winning compared to Danilo is Thomas Partey, but he is actually getting involved with a lot more, nearly 3 or over 3 more defensive duels than the Portuguese player. So again, another one that's going in Thomas Partey's favour. And for a player that usually isn't playing, if it was up to him anyway, at the out-and-out defensive midfield position. Aerial duels is a key one. 3.49 with a 68.5% win rate is very strong. If you make a comparison that to Partey, we've got 3 of those with a 66.4. So ever so slightly in the Portuguese man's favour. If we go into interceptions, 3.77 for Danilo. Interceptions for Thomas Partey is a 5.13. Again, Partey taking that one again. Losses to recoveries is actually slightly positive for Danilo, but still, it's not a massive skew in the recoveries. It's nearly even, if anything. And if we look at Thomas Partey's losses to recoveries, again, it's very similar, but he loses the ball slightly more, but he also wins it back slightly more. But it's a very, very similar skew in terms of positive to negative ratios there. Moving in finally into sort of the discipline areas, 1.32 fouls compared to Thomas Partey's 1.37 fouls, very similar. Yellow cards, 0.14 to Thomas Partey's 0.38. So twice as many yellows as Thomas Partey getting. So discipline-wise, Danilo would take that. But for me, still, it's not enough to give Danilo any sort of hope over Thomas Partey, in my opinion. So there you go. I feel like we've done a really comprehensive look at both players and how they would compare to one another, seeing as Arsenal are looking at the Portuguese man as a possible alternative. I've said from the start, I'm not a big fan because of the technical ability of the player. As Jose talked about in his breakdown, I tend to find that a massive stumbling block to want Arsenal to get him. And that's why I'm more in favour, much more in favour of getting a Thomas Partey. And the fee that was quoted for Danilo was around the 30 to 40 million. And I just think if you're going to spend that much on a player that's worse, go out, spend an extra £15 million or offer up a Matteo Guendouzi in a part exchange for like a 10 million or 20 million to plus Matteo Guendouzi for a Partey. I think that's a fair deal. And I think it makes sense to go the extra mile to get someone like Thomas Partey when he is just that much better. It's if he wants to come, is another thing. If Danilo wants to come and he actually came out in an interview saying that he does, then maybe that factors in. But for me, Partey is much more superior. But I want to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are on both players and how they compare. And then, of course, leave a like if you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here and turn those notifications on so you never miss a show. And as always...